Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little different. Not wars, not revolutions, not kings who married their cousins a dozen times. Instead, we're going to talk about fashion. But not just any fashion, the dangerous kind. The sort of beauty trends that made people literally sick, maimed, or quietly die in their sleep while still looking fabulous. So dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe grab a pillow. Let's slip softly into a world where beauty wasn't just skin deep, it was hazardous. Corsets, the gentle art of suffocation. Let's float gently back to the late 16th century. England, France, Italy. A time when women's fashion became, well, a sort of slow torture device disguised as art. Enter the corset. Corsets were supposed to shape a woman's figure into the ideal silhouette, small waist, lifted bust, and shoulders pulled back like some kind of human mannequin. The first corsets were not as dramatically tight as later ones. They were fairly comfortable compared to the horrors to come. But by the 18th and 19th centuries, the waist became a battlefield. Women started wearing corsets that could reduce their waist by up to several inches. And they didn't just cinch the waist. They squeezed the ribs, pushed the internal organs into strange arrangements, and, if we're honest, made breathing slightly more complicated. Doctors in Victorian England occasionally warned about corset sickness, a faintly dramatic way of saying you might pass out if you breathe too deeply. Symptoms ranged from fainting to digestive problems to shortness of breath. But fashion had a way of ignoring medical advice. There's something poetic, in a very sad way, about the fact that women were willing to compress themselves until they nearly collapsed, all for a shape dictated by art, not anatomy. And this wasn't just about beauty. It was about status. The tighter your corset, the more time you could spend not doing manual work, because obviously you couldn't bend over to sew or lift things without undoing half your outfit. The pinnacle, or perhaps nadir, came with the extreme Victorian corsets of the late 1800s. Waist sizes under 18 inches were considered a mark of refinement. At that point, we're no longer talking about clothing, but about a full-body commitment to a very, very particular form of self-sacrifice. And so, ladies and gentlemen, corsets became both a symbol of elegance and a quiet form of slow harm. Lead-based makeup. The pale face of poison. While corsets were slowly squeezing the life out of women, another beauty trend was quietly killing them from the inside. This was the era of pale skin as the ultimate sign of refinement. Forget suntans. The goal was to look so pale you might be mistaken for a ghost at a tea party. How did they achieve that? Lead-based makeup. Yes, lead. It was cheap, it was
Foot binding, painful elegance in ancient China. Now, let's drift eastward to ancient China, where a particularly extreme form of beauty took root for about 1,000 years, foot binding. This was a cultural practice where young girls, sometimes as young as 5, had their feet tightly bound with cloth to prevent growth. The goal? To create the lotus foot, a tiny, curved foot considered the epitome of feminine beauty and grace. Ideal size? Around 3 inches. Yes, really. The process was brutal. Bones were broken, toes curled under, arches compressed. Girls often lived in pain, unable to walk normally. Yet foot binding became an unquestioned part of high society life. It was a mark of status. If your feet were bound, you probably didn't have to work in the fields, which meant your family had wealth. The irony was obvious. Foot binding was both a painful sacrifice and a way to limit women's independence. Bound feet meant reduced mobility, which meant women spent their lives in domestic spaces. Beauty became a form of control. The practice persisted for centuries, even after medical professionals and reformers spoke against it. It wasn't officially banned until the early 20th century, a testament to the power of tradition and the stubbornness of fashion. Tonsorial tortures, the perils of hair dye in history. If you think hair dye today is complicated, imagine the centuries before chemistry made it safe. From ancient Rome to the Renaissance, people used lead, arsenic, and plant poisons to change their hair color. In Rome, women applied goat fat mixed with beechwood ashes to lighten hair. Not great, but better than later methods. By the Renaissance, hair dyes could include mercury and other dangerous substances. These were applied with little thought for health consequences. The goal was always the same: to chase a cultural ideal of beauty. Blonde hair, for example, was associated with youth and innocence. Black hair with mystery and allure. But the means to achieve these ideals were often toxic and damaging. There are historical records of women who lost their hair completely, developed rashes, or fell ill after repeated dyeing. But the dream of beautiful hair persisted. Which is a curious thing about beauty trends. They never seem to stop for the sake of health. And so we arrive at a curious truth about history. Across centuries, across continents, people have been willing to put their health, even their lives, on the line for beauty. Corsets, lead makeup, wigs, foot binding, dangerous dyes, all were the result of the strange power of cultural ideals. These beauty trends were never just about looking good. They were about status, control, conformity, and identity. And in many cases, the cost was very real.
Welcome back, friends. If you've been following along, we've just wandered through corsets, powdered wigs, lead makeup, foot binding, and hair dyes, each a quiet, slow story of sacrifice for beauty. Tonight, we continue our gentle stroll deeper into the strange, sometimes tragic history of fashion hazards. We'll meet hats that blocked streets, dresses that weighed more than a human, and beauty obsessions that bordered on the absurd. So stretch, adjust your pillow, and let's drift on. The towering hats of the 18th century. Our first stop is France and England in the late 1700s, the era of towering hats. Not just hats, but miniature architectural projects perched atop powdered hair. These were hats so large they needed scaffolding, or at least a servant to help carry them. These hats were sometimes adorned with feathers, flowers, even tiny model ships. Yes, ships. In fact, one style, called the pouf, could be the size of a small crate. It became fashionable for hats to reflect current events. So if there was a naval battle, some hats featured miniature battleships. If there was a royal wedding, expect hat-shaped recreations of the ceremony. The danger here was more practical than poisonous. Hats that large made walking through narrow streets a challenge. You might knock over a candle, a passerby, or even the hat of another fashionable woman, a faux pas of the highest order. Some hats were so tall and elaborate that they caused neck strain, headaches, and even mild concussions if the structure collapsed. And yet they were a sign of status and creativity. If you had a hat big enough to cause a minor traffic jam, you had arrived. So the taller the hat, the higher your rank, or at least the higher your commitment to vanity. Hoop skirts and crinolines, walking dangerously. Next, let's drift to the mid-19th century, when fashion embraced the wide skirt. This wasn't a simple flare or bell. This was hoop skirt mania. Crinolines, structured skirts supported by hoops of steel, were the height of elegance. They made a dress billow outwards like a cloud of fabric. But there was a catch. Hoops were not just cumbersome, they were dangerous. There are reports of crinolines catching fire from candles or stoves. In one case, a woman died when her hoop skirt caught alight in a restaurant. There were even documented cases of crinolines getting caught in carriage wheels, a tragic footnote in the history of fashion. Still, women wore them because they represented wealth. You needed someone to help you dress in a crinoline.
Skin whitening, a global obsession. Let's drift gently to another recurring theme, pale skin. We've touched on lead-based makeup already, but skin whitening goes far beyond Elizabethan powder. Across centuries and continents, pale skin has often been seen as a mark of beauty, refinement, and social status. In Europe, pale skin signified leisure. Farmers and workers worked outdoors, so tans were a mark of labor. Aristocrats stayed indoors and wore white powder to maintain a ghostly complexion. In Asia, the pursuit of pale skin was equally intense, but for different reasons. In China, Japan, and India, whiteness was associated with purity and class. This led to centuries of whitening creams, powders, and rituals, many containing mercury, arsenic, or lead, substances we now know to be poisonous. The irony is that the quest for beauty often involved self-harm. Yet the idea persisted. Beauty was not just an aesthetic choice, it was a cultural language, a statement of identity, and in some cases, a form of survival within societal expectations. Welcome back, friends. If you've been floating along so far, we've drifted through centuries of beauty rituals that could harm the body. Corsets, powdered wigs, foot binding, towering hats, crinolines, dangerous teeth trends, high heels, and the obsession with pale skin. Now let's glide into the modern era, where beauty dangers became a little subtler, but no less persistent. The 20th and 21st centuries brought makeup fads, cosmetic surgery, tanning obsessions, and beauty products that promised transformation at a cost. So fluff your pillow, relax your shoulders, and let's drift into the world of modern hazardous beauty. The perils of early makeup, from rouge to lead. Makeup didn't disappear after powdered wigs faded. In fact, the 20th century saw makeup become a central part of daily life for many women, and a new source of risk. Rouge, or facial blush, was popular in the early 1900s, but the ingredients weren't always safe. Mercury and lead-based pigments were still used well into the 20th century. Women applied them daily without realizing the slow toll they took on the body. Lipstick, another modern staple, also had a history of hazard. Early lipsticks contained poisonous dyes and lead. They were used liberally because nothing says glamour like slowly ingesting a toxic chemical throughout the day. By the mid-20th century, cosmetic science had improved. Regulations reduced dangerous ingredients, but makeup still carried risks: allergic reactions, clogged pores, and long-term skin sensitivity. Yet beauty had become inseparable from daily life. Makeup was no longer optional for many. It was part of social identity. And, as history shows, people have always been willing to take risks for beauty. The tanning craze and skin cancer. By the mid-20th century, pale skin had shifted in meaning in the West. Once a sign of leisure, it became a sign of health and wealth to be tan.
A suntan meant you could afford vacations, outdoor leisure, and luxury. This gave rise to tanning salons and artificial tanning methods, some of which were dangerously unregulated. Early tanning beds emitted high levels of UV radiation long before skin cancer risks were fully understood. By the late 20th century, research confirmed that tanning increased skin cancer risk. Yet the craze persisted. People willingly exposed themselves to damage because a tan was fashionable. And it's worth noting, this beauty ideal wasn't global. In other parts of the world, pale skin remained preferred, creating a strange cultural divide over whether to tan or to whiten. Either way, it was a reminder, beauty ideals shift, but they always bring a risk with them.
The rise of cosmetic surgery. Beauty by scalpel. Cosmetic surgery is one of the clearest modern examples of beauty danger. Surgery has long existed, but by the late 20th century, it became mainstream. Facelifts, breast augmentation, liposuction, all designed to change the body according to beauty ideals. But surgery is inherently risky. Complications, infections, anesthesia mishaps, these are not side effects of fashion. They're the reality of altering the human body with knives and needles. Still, the demand grew, in part because media and advertising reinforced the idea that beauty was attainable and permanent, if you paid the price. And the price wasn't just monetary, it was physical risk, recovery time, and sometimes a loss of self in pursuit of perfection. Cosmetic surgery today is more regulated, but dangers remain. And the deeper truth is that the desire to alter appearance surgically is an echo of centuries-old beauty sacrifices. The tools have changed, but the impulse has not. Extreme diets and body modification. Another modern trend tied to beauty danger is extreme dieting. The 20th century saw the rise of diet culture, with certain body shapes becoming ideals enforced by fashion, media, and advertising. From calorie restriction to fad diets to dangerous supplements, people have harmed themselves in pursuit of a particular figure. Eating disorders such as anorexia and bulimia became tragic byproducts of this pressure. These aren't just health issues, they're cultural phenomena shaped by beauty ideals. Similarly, body modification, tattoos, piercings, implants has risks. Infection, allergic reaction, nerve damage. These are the real dangers behind a seemingly aesthetic choice. Yet for many, the risk is worth it, because beauty is not purely visual. It is deeply tied to identity and self-expression. These modern trends are not so different from the extremes of the past. The tools have changed, but the underlying desire to fit into an ideal, to stand out, to transform, remains the same. The continuing obsession with skin whitening. Of course, skin whitening didn't vanish in the modern era. In many parts of the world, it became a multi-billion-dollar industry. Creams, lotions, injections, and even surgeries promised lighter skin. But many of these products contain dangerous ingredients, mercury, hydroquinone, corticosteroids, that can cause serious health problems. Yet the demand remains high, driven by cultural ideals linking fairness with beauty, success, and social status. The irony here is striking. After centuries of harmful beauty practices, skin whitening continues as a dangerous beauty trend, despite medical warnings. It's another reminder that beauty ideals are not merely about personal preference, they're deeply cultural and resistant to change.
Welcome back. So far, we've wandered through centuries of fashion that quietly harmed those who wore it. Corsets, wigs, foot binding, towering hats, crinolines, toxic makeup, tanning, cosmetic surgery, and the ongoing obsession with skin whitening. Now let's drift a little deeper. Let's talk about why we do it, why beauty has always demanded risk, and why, despite centuries of cautionary tales, these trends persist. The psychology of dangerous beauty. If beauty were purely about aesthetics, we might expect it to avoid harm. But beauty is not simply about looking good. It's a language. It's a way to communicate status, identity, and belonging. And in many cultures, it's a silent rule book. Beauty trends become dangerous when they require sacrifice. The sacrifice can be comfort, like corsets. It can be health, like lead makeup. It can even be mobility, like foot binding. Yet we comply because beauty is not a personal choice alone, it's cultural. Cultural ideals dictate what is beautiful, and culture is slow to change. That's why dangerous beauty trends persist. They are not just personal decisions, they are social agreements passed down through generations. There is also an element of power. Beauty is often tied to social privilege. Those who fit the ideal can gain access to opportunities. This creates pressure to conform, even when it costs health or well-being. Fashion as control. Throughout history, fashion has been a form of control over bodies, over behavior, over society itself. Corsets shaped more than bodies. They shaped movement, breathing, even daily life. Foot binding shaped more than feet. It shaped women's independence. And beauty ideals today still shape behavior in subtle ways. Cosmetic surgery, extreme diets, skin whitening creams, high heels. Each carries a cost, and each asks for a certain surrender. And in our connected world, beauty ideals spread faster than ever. Social media amplifies trends, making them global. The risks are no longer contained to one culture or one century. Dangerous beauty has gone worldwide. We might ask, will future generations look back on today's trends and shake their heads as we do with corsets and lead makeup? Perhaps, but beauty has a way of reinventing itself, and risk seems always to be part of the equation. And so, drifting toward the close of tonight's story, we arrive at a quiet truth. Dangerous beauty trends are not accidents. They are part of the human condition. They are cultural contracts passed down, adapted, and revived across time. We've seen this through centuries, from the corsets of Victorian England to the skin creams of modern Asia. And we've seen it again and again. Beauty demands sacrifice. Sometimes that sacrifice is comfort. Sometimes it is health. Sometimes it is life itself. In the next part, we'll gently drift into a kind of reflection. We'll look at the quiet lessons history offers about beauty, risk, and human desire. And we'll end tonight's journey with the sort of sleepy meditation you'd expect from the Sleepless Historian.
Welcome back. Tonight, we've wandered across centuries of dangerous beauty. Corsets that reshaped bodies, wigs that hid decay, foot binding that limited mobility, towering hats that obstructed streets, crinolines that caught fire, makeup that poisoned, tanning trends that burned, surgeries that reshaped lives, and countless other rituals of appearance.
As we drift toward the end of tonight's journey, let's pause for a quiet reflection on what these trends tell us about beauty and ourselves. Beauty as a mirror of society. One thing is clear: beauty trends are never isolated. They are mirrors of the societies that create them. Corsets reflected an era of formality and hierarchy. Foot-binding reflected a culture of gender roles and status. Powdered wigs reflected the desire for refinement and spectacle. Today's beauty trends reflect media influence, globalization, and technology. Beauty trends tell us about values, power, and even economics. They reveal what a society prizes, what it fears, and what it seeks to control. And sometimes beauty trends reveal contradictions. Pale skin was a sign of leisure, but also of fragility. Foot-binding was a mark of elegance, but also of oppression. Cosmetic surgery promises transformation, but can create harm. These contradictions are part of what makes beauty dangerous, because beauty is never just appearance, it is ideology. The cost of conformity. Perhaps the quietest danger of beauty trends is conformity. Dangerous beauty trends persist not because individuals blindly follow them, but because societies expect them. There is comfort in belonging, but there is a cost. Conformity asks us to accept certain rules about appearance, behavior, and identity. And those rules carry physical, emotional, and cultural risks. The history of dangerous beauty shows us that these risks are not accidental. They are part of how beauty functions. Beauty is not just aesthetic. It is cultural, ideological, and often deeply personal. And it has a quiet, persistent capacity to demand sacrifice. So as you rest tonight, perhaps consider the history beneath what you wear, how you present yourself, and the beauty ideals that shape the world around you. Beauty is never free. It always comes with a cost, and the cost has been paid again and again throughout history.
Welcome back, and thank you
Sleep
for
well.
drifting along with me. Tonight, we've walked softly through centuries of beauty, through the strange, the dangerous, and the quietly tragic. We've seen how something as simple as clothing, makeup, or posture can carry risks that extend far beyond skin deep. As we close, let's drift into a slower place, a place where beauty becomes not a list of fashions, but a meditation on human desire itself. Beauty as a quiet human compulsion. There is something deeply human about beauty. It is not merely surface. It is a compulsion woven into our cultures, our rituals, our stories. Beauty connects us to tradition, to identity, and to each other. But beauty is not without cost. History shows us that beauty often demands sacrifice of comfort, health, even life itself. Corsets compressed lungs, wigs poisoned scalps, foot binding broke bones, makeup corroded skin. And today, surgeries and extreme diets still exact their toll. This is the quiet, almost paradoxical truth of beauty. It is both a joy and a danger. Perhaps that is why beauty persists, because even knowing the cost, we still desire it. Not simply because of vanity, but because beauty speaks to something deeper, a longing to belong, to be seen, to express identity. A gentle reflection on risk. Risk is part of the story.
Risk is part of what makes beauty beautiful. There is a strange intimacy in the fact that beauty can demand danger. It reminds us that beauty is not static. It evolves, it adapts, it carries meaning. And risk is what makes beauty something we negotiate. It is not purely given, it is chosen, even if unconsciously. And that choice, in turn, tells us something about who we are and who we want to be. Perhaps dangerous beauty trends survive because they speak to that choice. They remind us that beauty is a negotiation between the self and society, desire and consequence, individuality and conformity. The history of beauty as a story. When we look back at dangerous beauty trends, we are not merely looking at curious fashions. We are looking at a history of humanity. We are looking at the way we have shaped ourselves and been shaped in return. Each corset, each powdered wig, each beauty ritual is a thread in a vast tapestry, a tapestry of human aspiration and sacrifice. Beauty is a story we continue to write, and every era adds its chapter. The dangerous beauty trends of the past are not gone. They live on in new forms, adapted to the present. They remind us that beauty is always a living tradition. It is always part of the human story.
And now, here we are, the end of tonight's journey. We have floated softly through centuries of beauty's quiet dangers. We have wandered from corsets to powdered wigs, from foot binding to towering hats, from crinolines to tanning beds. We've seen how beauty, across time and cultures, has demanded sacrifice, comfort, health, freedom, even life itself. Tonight, we have done more than catalogue trends. We have traced a story, a human story. Beauty is not merely clothing, makeup, or posture. It is an inheritance, a tradition, a conversation across centuries. And like any story worth telling, it leaves us with a quiet question. The quiet question of beauty. What is beauty worth? That question has echoed through history. The answer has been different in every age. For some, beauty was worth corsets so tight the ribs cracked. For others, powdered wigs that poisoned. For others still, skin whitening that harmed health. Today, beauty can still demand extreme sacrifice through diets, surgeries, or the pressure of impossible ideals. But perhaps the answer is always the same. Beauty is worth something because it is part of who we are. It is not just surface. It is identity, expression, culture, and history. And every generation negotiates that worth in its own way. The beauty trends of history remind us that risk has always been part of that negotiation, that danger is part of beauty's legacy, that beauty is never free. A gentle farewell. So, as we drift to the close tonight, here's the quiet thought to take with you. Beauty is not a simple gift. It is a contract. It is a choice, and it comes with cost. The past whispers this to us softly. The history of dangerous beauty is not a warning to give up beauty. It is a reminder to look beneath the surface, to understand what beauty demands, and to know what we are willing to pay for it.
Perhaps that is the quiet magic of beauty, that it is always more than it seems, that it carries stories, risks, sacrifices, and desires that stretch across centuries. So tonight, as you settle your head and close your eyes, remember this story, the story of beauty, strange and dangerous, a story written not just in fashion, but in human history itself. Sleep well.